Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 2021. We took a nice long break for the holidays, and now we are back with another fantastic episode and lots of good guests coming this year. Let's do a little business, and then we will get down to business. So let's talk about Viking Coffee. Viking Coffee, the best out of Bowling Green, Ohio. My favorite coffee. It's the coffee you see in all my pictures when I'm putting out a book or something that I'm reading. It's pretty much all I drink. So Viking Coffee. Check them out at vikingcoffeeco.com. Use the code VikingCoffee10 at checkout for 10% off. My favorite is the Old Man Strength blend from the show. You got to check that out. I think that's one of Evan's best sellers. So check that out and let me know what you think. Cerberus has the best gear in the game if you're a Highland Games athlete, if you're a strongman, if you're a power lifter. Cerberus has everything you need. I just saw they just released a pair of strongman shorts, which are going to be great for both strongman and Highland Games. You got to wear something under that kilt so you're not shocking the fans. Heavy duty, keeps your hips and thighs and butt warm. Great stuff. Check them out. I highly recommend them. Cerberus-strength.us. Use the code REFINESAVAGE10 at checkout for 10% off. Warrior CBD, really good stuff. There's so many CBD companies and products out there these days, and just like everything else, a lot of them are garbage. Warrior CBD is fantastic. Really, really good stuff, and the customer service is out of this world. If you have questions about CBD oil in general, or whether or not a certain product is right for you, or what you need to purchase, get a hold of them on Instagram at Warrior CBD and send Nancy a message. She will answer your questions and let you know what she thinks. But I highly recommend it. I've tried a lot of CBD oil, and theirs is by far my favorite. Check them out at warriorcbdofficial.com. Use the code WARRIOR20 off at checkout. Serious Steel. If you are outfitting any kind of gym, whether it's your garage gym or a gym like a CrossFit box, functional fitness center, whatever you need, Serious Steel is the answer. They have all the equipment of those other big places, except these are people who are supporting things you love, like this podcast. Hopefully you love it if you're listening to it. Serious Steel, their customer service is outstanding. Their products are outstanding, and their prices are the best in the business. You got to give them a holler. I love these guys. Hey, anybody that Chad Clark is associated with has got to be good people, right? So give them a holler. SeriousSteel.com. Use the code SAVAGE at checkout for 10% off. Stay Classy Meats. If you are not hunting your own meat, Stay Classy Meats is the way to go. I have a freezer filled with, I got a quarter steer from some friends of mine at the gym. I have a deer in that freezer as well, and I just got my 12, every 12 weeks I get a box from Stay Classy Meats, the Elite Box, 35 pounds of meat, and I got to tell you, it goes to the front of the list. As soon as that box comes in, I start eating Stay Classy Meats steaks over the other stuff I have in there. It's just the best. Their bison, their beef is out of this world. It's like Christmas morning when I see that box arrive on my doorstep. So if you're not hunting your own meats, this is the way to go. They taste great, and they are humanely raised animals, humanely processed animals. No hormones, no antibiotics. They're eating fresh grasses, drinking fresh streams. Small batch farming in Bozeman, Montana. You got to give these guys a holler. And they've been with us forever. Just great sponsors. StayClassyMeats.com. Use the code SAVAGE at checkout. The Breath Belt. The Breath Belt is making its rounds all over Instagram. I see it on everybody now. And I just sent one to Evan Marcus with the Cleveland Browns. Not because I think Evan Marcus can't get one on his own. It's because, man, this is a product I actually believe in. So I love it, man. I wear it as an underbelt. And when I pull a heavy deadlift, it really, really gives you some solid support. But people are using it for running and calisthenics and kettlebell lifting and strongman. It's fantastic. They're finding new uses for this thing every day. So give them a holler. Thebreathbelt.com. Use the code SAVAGE20, all caps, SAVAGE20 at checkout for 20% off. And give them a shot. It's a great belt. Don't take my word for it. You'll love it. Finally today, the online virtual training program from Blind Dog Gym. This is the program that I run. We have several different options. So we have 6 different programs that get released every Sunday night. That's for $40 a month. And you get access to all 6 programs. There's a program for Highland Games and track and field athletes. There's a program for old school bodybuilders. There's a program for people who are stuck in their homes or don't have access to equipment or just want to train with their body weight. So there's a body weight program. There's a gear program, which is all kettlebells. The Primal program, which is the exact program we use every day at Blind Dog Gym. And finally, the Foundations program, which is great if you're like a high school football coach and have no fucking clue what to do with your athletes in the weight room and you're not hiring some strength and conditioning professional. This is the way to go. This is a simple program that you can put in effect with your athletes, and it's safe, it's productive, and you're going to get a lot out of it. We also do personalized programs. So if you're a Highland Games athlete who wants to make some huge progress this off season and you want something specifically designed for you, give me a holler and we'll give you some price options on that. Also, we have virtual personal training. So let's say you're getting ready for a Highland Games competition or a strongman competition and you want me to guide you through a couple sessions or daily sessions or weekly sessions, whatever. You give me a holler. $25 for the program, and I sit down with you, $25 a session, and we just kind of go over what you're doing. I'll lead you through the program, and we'll personal train you from anywhere in the world. So give me a holler. You can give me a shout at blinddoggym@gmail.com or shoot me a DM on Instagram at TheRefinedSavage, and we'll hook you up, and we'll get you started, answer any questions you might have. All right, so let's talk about today. We are in January. It is World Carnivore Month, and let's talk about the guy who got this whole ball rolling, Dr. Shawn Baker. We sat down for about an hour, had a great talk on the carnivore diet and a bunch of other things. So here's the guy who started. He is the OG of the carnivore diet. Everyone thought he was crazy at first. Now everyone's starting to think he's a genius. I'm definitely in the genius camp. So let's give this a listen. Have fun, enjoy this podcast, and we'll see you motherfuckers at the end.
Yeah, it's been going good. Dr. Shawn Baker, how are things in the Soviet Socialist Republic of California?
Very good. You know, it's funny. We're looking for homes in other parts of the country right now.
I bet.
Yeah, it's probably time to get out of here. I'm not a California. I've just been kind of temporarily here, and the weather's pretty. It's nice. There's some good things. There's good people here, but it is getting a little ridiculous. And I think I don't think I'm alone in saying that for sure.
No, I don't think so at all. I think that's the general consensus, is that people are just leaving either they're leaving or they want to leave. And I just don't understand why people aren't at the top aren't seeing that.
Well, I think they kind of are, because they're trying to impose taxes on people leaving big companies. They want to keep hitting them up with taxes even after they leave, or some insanity. But I think they're getting the message, and I think the effort to recall the governor is probably going to result in an election, whether it actually gets him out or not. But that's probably going to happen. It seems. I think like they're going to have enough signatures.
They're at like 600,000 right now.
No, I think they're over 1 million now. I think they need one. I think they need 1.5 million by like St. Patrick's Day, and I think they've crossed the 1 million threshold, and it's picking up steam as it it's like anything. As something gets more essential, it's successful. People jump on the bandwagon, and so initially I think that's a bunch of nuts are never going to go anywhere, and they're seeing that it actually has a chance, and so I think now more and more people are. Getting into it, and there's been some people looking at, running to oppose the guy. So we'll see. I suspect it'll happen, whether or not, enough people will vote to get him out, or if enough votes will get counted to get him out. We'll have to see.
Isn't that how Schwarzenegger eventually got to be governor?
It was like, Gray Davis got kicked out in 2003. I think it was the first. Might have been the first time in California. I think my understanding, they've had like 51 recalls that have happened over the years in California, and Schwarzenegger taking out Davis, or Davis getting kicked out was the first one that actually happened. And so I think This may be another one. We'll see. I mean, a lot of people are frustrated. Even, it doesn't matter their political leanings. They don't like hypocrisy regardless.
Yeah, it's really odd that this, the virus and everything, it seems to have taken on a political slant, whether or not you're worried about this, whether or not you agree with the lockdowns. It's really odd how it's taken on, politics with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that have been politicized that probably shouldn't be, including, I guess, somewhat to some degree, nutrition. But yeah, this coronavirus has been wildly politicized, and so if whether we want to wear a mask or not, or be locked down or not, I mean, that's taken on some incredibly vitriolic, politicized, stuff out there. These people that are just wishing death on these people that are not wanting to do what they believe is right. So it's kind of interesting and sad at the same time.
Well, I mean, how does it feel for you? I mean, you've become, as bad as social media is and as screwed up as it is, people like yourself and some of these other doctors out there who have come forward with kind of an alternative approach to what we're seeing in the media as far as the virus and what you should do. I mean, you're becoming the source of information for a lot of people out there, you and others like you, who are actually, speaking truth to power and letting it be known that, maybe we don't necessarily have a global pandemic as much as an epidemic of laziness and poor nutrition and bad health.
Well, and again, obviously my sort of angle has been about nutrition and health and fitness and exercising and staying strong and physically being prepared so that when a virus comes in contact with you, you can easily combat that, like we have for literally millions of years as our species has evolved. And I think that is tragically not being emphasized. I mean, we have this we have this take a pill, put on a mask mentality among all things, and it's been no difference with this. It's sad to see that and it's overwhelmingly obvious who is getting sick and who is dying from this. And yes, everybody can say, yeah, I knew a healthy guy that got sick and so on and so forth. But by and large, the people that are filling up the ERs, the hospital beds, the ICUs are these people that are, either they're very, very old, which, is standard for any kind of infectious disease, or they are metabolically compromised, obese, so on and so forth. And that is clearly what's going on. And if you were to say what would be the most effective, now the question is, can you truly affect this? I believe you can, but the most effective strategy would be let's take these people that are clearly vulnerable and either protect them through isolation, appropriate these little socks on your face. They're not doing shit, quite honestly. I mean, I say that as a surgeon who wore a mask my whole career.
Right.
The reason I was wearing that was not to protect my patients from viral particles, and certainly throwing a sock over your face is not doing anything. And if you look around what people talk about and they look at studies and we're saying, well, these studies are done on people that are perfectly wearing a mask, a brand new surgical mask, and there's a small reduction in particle transmission. Whereas what you look what's going on in the population, half of it people aren't putting on a brand new mask every time they get out of their, they grab it off the visor or the seat and they throw it on their face and then they use it again 50 times, or they have a cloth one that doesn't work very well. And so it's kind of, sort of, we're not seeing best case scenario. And I think if we look at what's the actual usage, we'd see it's just not very, very helpful at all. But back to the point of, can you improve somebody's metabolic health? Well, people say, well, it's not practical to do it in 2 weeks or a month. I said, my God, we've been sitting here now for 10 months. Yes. How many people could have lost 50 pounds in that period of time that need to lose it? And I don't think anyone would doubt that that's very doable. And does it make a difference? Absolutely it does. Can you bring your blood sugar down to diabetic levels or very high levels to normal in a matter of a month? Absolutely you can. We see that all the time. I see it all the time. And so the fact that we're not emphasizing that, to me, is very, very disheartening as a physician, and other physicians out there that are trying to encourage, they're here, I'm going to pony up and roll up my sleeve and get the vaccine, or I'm going to walk around with a mask. Yes, that's something that may be helpful for some people. I know there's people that vastly disagree with that message, but I think more importantly, we have to say, look, it's time we faced saw the whole, looked in the mirror and took a real hard look at ourselves as a population and said, look, we're fucked. We look like garbage. I mean, this is, it's like, shitting 50 pounds of shit in a 20-pound bag. I mean, this is what we've got, is people walking around like that. And it's like, this is what our population is. And until we are willing to aggressively address that, I mean, this is going to be pandemic after pandemic and after pandemic, and the quote unquote new normal, and we see Cosmopolitan celebrating some morbidly obese woman on the cover saying, this is healthy. Well, fuck no, it's not healthy. It's not healthy at all. And it's not that we need to attack these people or call them bad people, but we need to say, look, there is a certain definition of health, and it's not morbid obesity.
Yeah, it's like we have a shortage of truth. And again, going back to social media, if there wasn't social media, we would never get any alternative perspectives. It would be all this stuff that's coming from the mainstream media that, stay in your house, wear your mask. It's okay that you're heavy. This isn't your fault. But, I've been saying this for months that, I understand if my parents are in their 70s. Speaking of, they got COVID over the holidays and it barely touched them. They, they came through it like champs. But you've had 10 months to get healthy, to get in shape, to lose the excess weight, to get your blood sugar, to get metabolically healthy. And people that aren't doing it, there's not much sympathy I can have for you at this point. You know what you need to do.
Well, I mean, and part of it obviously, and it depends on where you live. When you lock down, your business goes under, you're struggling to make a living. What happens to your food choices in that situation? Well, you can't afford to eat better food in many cases. So you go to the poverty diet. And this is a problem with this country and many others, is the poverty diet is caloric excess of garbage, it's the cheap stuff you can buy on the shelf for, 2 for $3 or something like that, a big box of cereal, or, it's all this processed garbage that we have. And so that's what's happening. And so not only you're not allowed to go to the gym, some places you're not even allowed to be outside, realistically, where they shut down the parks, they shut down the places where you might be able to try to go get some exercise. And then you don't have enough money. So now you're eating junk food. And so your metabolic health is just getting worse. And then there's, not to mention, the stress environment that's going on. I mean, people, they don't know what's going on, what's going to happen in my career, what's going to happen in my family. Very stressful time. And that doesn't help our ability to, thrive and fight off infections.
Yeah. You became, you were active on Twitter. You became known to me through Highland Games, but I think you became known to everyone when you got on the Joe Rogan show talking about the carnivore diet, because up until that time, I think you were really the only one who was doing this.
Well, I mean, probably the only one that was doing it in a visible enough way to people actually took notice. And, the fact that I was an MD and then, a reasonably successful athlete, that kind of sort of said, hey, this guy's doing some weird shit. And, and also my personality is I just don't give a fuck. Yeah. I'm just like, I don't care what you think. I'm going to do what's going to work for me. And, obviously, Rogan somehow got wind of that. And, when I went on his show back, I guess it was 2017, end of 2017. So about a little over 3 years ago, I really didn't appreciate his reach. I mean, it's kind of like going on the Oprah Winfrey effect, but I didn't really, because I didn't really follow Joe. I didn't, I knew kind of a little bit who he was. And he said, hey man, you want to come on? And I said, yeah, sure. I'll come up there. And I just drove up there because I don't live far from where he was, back in LA when he was doing his show. And so I just sat down, had a nice conversation, and wasn't really planning on doing a doctoral dissertation defense of this. I was just like, hey, this is the experience. And so there's people that were critical. Hey, why didn't you present all the science out there? I'm like, well, really, there's not much out there at this point. And there still isn't. I mean, there's more than there was when I started. And there's more that's happening in the background that's coming on. There's a lot of studies that are in progress or will be in progress on this stuff. But, obviously, he has a huge reach and it's getting bigger. And he's one of the people out there that, for good or bad, it's like when we have these celebrities that have an opinion, they impact, it's like Beyonce telling you to drink Pepsi or whatever. I don't know, is she Pepsi or Coke? I can't remember. But anyway, they impact millions upon millions of people, and they're not any more qualified than your grandmother was, basically. I mean, honestly. So, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely been I would say it's definitely been a life-altering experience. I don't know that I would have pursued a different path. I mean, it's allowed me to be a little more successful because I think today, and this is an interesting, thought on capital. And so, back in the old days, hundreds of years ago, if you had a lot of people that would work for you, you had the ability to make an impact. And then suddenly later we had people with a lot of cash and had a lot of capital in the form of money that could make things happen. And these days now, influence is becoming capital. So media, the ability to influence people, also scalability, and to have a product that, like a digital product, is hugely, it's a different type of capital. And so I think the system of, what is influential has changed. And so I think, the understanding that social media and influence is extremely valuable in this day and age, and will continue to be more so. And so that's been something that's allowed me to do more things than I could have otherwise. And I've been exposed to a lot of people, and there's a lot of people that are getting it, starting to get the message and want to support what I'm doing, what others are doing like me. And so that's been one of the benefits. Now, you're right, social media, it's got a lot of problems. There's a lot of just idiocy there. And we see, some of the stuff that's concerning a little bit is and we see this play out, whether you're, whatever political party you're affiliated, we do see some degree of censorship going on. Should we allow hate speech and neo-Nazis to scream? And that's a debate you can have, but at the same time, it's like, where do you draw the line? And that slope becomes pretty slippery, because I've seen, when I talked about coronavirus, and I simply said, hey, should we, and it wasn't anything inflammatory, don't listen to the government. It was just basically, hey, maybe we should consider these other alternative approaches. And that was, I think I basically, you see the social media just drop. It's like the number of views just drop immediately. And there's some background stuff going on where they, drive the algorithms away from you and that type of stuff. So it's like I said, it's a two-edged sword for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting to me how, I think when you first came out, even before you got on Rogan's show, he talked, he would mention to other guests, hey, have you seen this crazy guy? All he eats is meat, this doctor on Twitter. And then it was kind of a slow drop till you finally get on the show. And then I remember after you came on, a lot of people still were like, oh, this is the rich guy's diet, or this is, this can't be healthy. And more though, you're seeing those people kind of come over to the fold and kind of say, oh, this does make a lot of sense when you look into it. And I think you've had a lot of influence on not just people like myself, but other doctors and other people in the nutrition and health and fitness industry that way.
Yeah, we've got I've got a company called MeatRx, and it's, the name is pretty much in your face. It's like we're using meat as a prescription for health. And I have hundreds of doctors that are part of that program that are on board with this. They are seeing what I saw. I mean, I'm not a crazy person as much as, that what I espouse may be seen by them as crazy. But I mean, I come from a fairly, I was a military guy. I was a nuclear weapons guy. I was, they screen you for psychological issues to be handling. So, I mean, I was pretty well vetted with regard to that. And I still tend to be very skeptical about most things. And even with this, I don't try to make claims that it's going to prolong your life. I don't think anyone can know that. And so I'm just saying, look, I've got people that are sick, they're fat, they've got autoimmune disease, they've got joint pain. We put them on a meat-based diet and all that shit goes away. There's something there. And we should explore that further. And I think that's something we shouldn't, demonize, unnecessarily. And I think there's a lot of problems with nutrition research. I think there's a lot of as I delve into this further, I think this demonization of meat has been unfortunately a mistake, and I think there's reasons why that's occurred. Some of them are probably just mistakes. Some of them are probably people with agendas. But I think there's as we see further and further evidence coming to light, things like, let's just, I'll use this example. And I think, so we have this belief that, red meat causes issues with the gut. And there's a compound called TMA, trimethylamine, which the liver converts to TMAO, called trimethylamine oxide. And what we see is that compound in somebody with a healthy gut biome, they don't convert much of the red meat into TMA. But if you stick red meat into somebody with a compromised gut, a dysbiotic gut microbiome, then in that situation, they may produce more of this compound. And so what we're seeing is, the modern industrial diet, which is, this processed garbage. You go to the grocery store and shelf stable stuff will sit on the shelf for 5 years. It's got some combination of a refined grain, a seed oil, and some sugar product most of the time. That is not what we're designed to eat. And I think that's been causing a lot of gut disruption and gut problems. And then when you drop red meat into that environment, potentially there's problems. Now you take it out of that environment. So this is why we see this. If we look at like Asian populations, so when they look at when they do the epidemiology has a lot of problems. There's healthy user bias. There's very low relative risk score. But even if we were to say that none of that matters, when we look at the Western populations, when they eat meat, there's a slightly increased risk of colorectal cancer. But if we look at the Asian populations, there's no increased risk. And what is the difference there? I would say that, one, there's probably healthy user bias. In Asia, meat is seen as a food of the wealthy, and healthy people want to eat meat because they're like, yeah, I finally made it. I can afford to eat meat. Whereas in the U.S., meat is considered, that's not refined. I'll use your podcast. You should be eating, eggplant or something like that instead. And so what we see is that, when we look at the epidemiology coming out of Asia, no relationship between red meat and colorectal cancer. And I think what's happening is some of it's healthy user bias, but some of it may be the fact that we're sticking what would normally be a normal human healthy food, meat, which we've been eating since humans have existed. And if you're a creationist, you may go back, I don't know, 8,000 years or whenever supposedly God rested on the seventh day, or evolutionary model where we go back to Homo habilis 2.8 million years ago. Sometime in that point, we've been eating red meat the entire time, and it's not been a problematic. Now, if it's truly a problem, it's probably in the context of this, garbage diet that we've been on for the last, century or so.
Yeah. One of the things I talk to people about, and I always tell the people that I work with that I'm not going to give you nutrition advice. I'll tell you exactly where I'm coming from and exactly what I do. But a lot of the reasons I thought that this all made sense to me is looking at documentaries on Neanderthal and these early hominids, and they were following the herds. They weren't eating bitter roots and seeds and things off plants when there was a ready available supply of meat for them. And it just made more sense to me that that's the way we were supposed to eat. It's the way we've always eaten. And it's just in the last few hundred years that really that's been turned around since, agriculture has been, or I guess the last couple thousand years, but, we're meant to eat this way.
Yeah, it's obviously Neanderthal. We're not Neanderthals, although we are kind of partially, as you probably are aware. There's probably some evidence that we crossbred with Neanderthals, and many humans have up to about 4% Neanderthal DNA. Probably you and I have a little bit higher amount as we're big meathead, knucklehead, Highland Games guys. But certainly, the Neanderthal, if we look at isotopic data out of Europe, and Michael Richards at Max Planck University has done a lot of research around this, and it shows that the amount of meat humans consume exceeded that of other top level predators and carnivores, including wolves. So we would eat more meat than wolves would as a Neanderthal, and the humans that were in that area as well. And so that's fairly certain that whether we ate exclusively meat or not, we ate a hell of a lot of meat. That was, and like you said, it is, there's a nice article called Elephant Hunting in the Paleolithic, I believe, or something along those lines, written out of a group out of Tel Aviv, who looked at Homo erectus and their ability to hunt these big, large mega herbivores like mastodons, mammoths, elephants, and they were able to eat those and kill those at will. There was no difficulty. I mean, it was basically an all-you-can-eat, fatty meat, ribeye bonanza all day long, every day. And I don't think we were starving. I don't think we were going through periods of feasting and famining so much back then. I think the famine came in when we went to agriculture. But if you think about how did we develop this hominid brain from a 300 cc chimp brain all the way up to what we peaked at, in the human lineage, 1700 cc's in the Neanderthal. They topped out at 1700. We're currently at about 1300 cc's as modern humans. And if we go back to Cro-Magnon and some of these early modern humans that populated Europe, we're looking at a 1500 cc brain. Now we've lost about 200 cc's in our brain size since about 10, 20,000 years ago, as we adopted an agricultural based nutritional strategy, because we lost on some of that nutrition, some of that energy. And I think that was our decision to shift into a more plant-based, agricultural-based diet was not a decision out of, desire. It was a decision out of necessity. As we, became, as our population grew, and as, we were just clearly good hunters. I mean, we were the apex predators of the world. We were very efficient at it. Initially when there was only a few 100,000 humans running around and then a few million, we had plenty of food. But as we kind of got into that 5 million range, and we started wiping out more and more of these big megafaunal animals. And there's some people will say some of it was climate related, but regardless, those animals died and they went away. And so now we're left with lean animals that run away. They don't sit there. Like, if you've ever been, I went out to the Serengeti many years ago, and we came upon this big giant, I guess herd of elephant, and they don't run away. When they see humans, right. They don't like, ooh, I'm scared. They just look at you and go, what are you going to do, little man? Because they're like, they're like 25 times bigger than you. It's like, it's like a little toddler coming up to you and yelling at you. You're like, hey, well, that's nice, that's cute. But then you pull out a spear and you chuck it at them, you stick them in the side, and then it's a different story. And these elephants, in Africa, that's why the elephants in Africa are still around, because they sort of co-evolved with humans. So they kind of got a little bit wary. But when humans rapidly expanded across Asia, Europe, North America, those animals didn't know what the hell we were. They thought, well, that's another little guy. I'm not worried about it. I got no predators. Then all of a sudden we pull out our weapons and we start, killing them by the masses. We see these big pits in Mexico. They're finding all these elephants, that we trapped. But so then, about, I don't know, 75, 50,000 years ago, we started running out of the food. We developed range technology. The bow and arrow was developed about 60,000 years ago to help us kind of come to terms with the fact that we can't just walk up to an elephant and stab it anymore. We got to chase these animals around. We're getting leaner cuts of meat, less energy from that. So now we have to look for a plant source to provide that extra calorie. So now we're figuring, how do we process these seeds, these nuts, these grains, these starchy vegetables that are underground, many of which will kill us. Many people don't realize this, but if you go out and eat raw potatoes and raw nuts and seeds, many of those will just flat out kill you. So we had to figure out how to process that to get the energy from that. And since that time, like I said, as a human species, it has allowed us to expand in number, but we've gotten weaker individually and sicker individually. So we've basically just, flourished, numerically, but, we're no longer robust. You can imagine, maybe, I'll talk about the Gravettians. They occupied Central Europe, kind of in this, I think the area where maybe Czechoslovakia was. I think it's where they were. But anyway, that Central Europe area, these people were the tallest recorded human beings to have been on the planet. And this is 30,000 years ago. And they were avid mammoth hunters. They were specialist mammoth hunters. And so if we look at the tallest population on Earth right now, it's arguably like the Netherlands or Croatia. There's some Nilotic Africans that are, on average, the male height is about 6'1", which doesn't seem that tall, but if you look at the average male height in the U.S., it's 5'10", so 6'1", and so you're seeing people that are 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", walking around. Well, back 30,000 years ago, when the Mayans and all these other people, when they weren't there, the Mayans, but the Mayan average height was something like 4'11" for a male.
Right. You
had guys that were 6'2" on average, Gravettians, and so it probably meant some of those guys were walking around 6'9", 6'10", big, strong, muscular guys. They're just freaks, and that was probably average back then. They've been good Highland Games guys.
Yeah, right. That'd be perfect. Talking about brain size, are you seeing with the meat-based diet? Are you seeing changes in brain activity? People, especially like the elderly, is it helping them at all? Or maybe even if it's anecdotal evidence of help with that, or CTE, things like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as, post-traumatic, concussive stuff and, PTSD, we're seeing a lot of, particularly because I don't see as many older people with dementia, but I'm certainly seeing many, many people with mood disorders, bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, like I said, PTSD, addiction type things. That dramatically is improving for a lot of people. And I think there's a number of reasons as to why that's going on. Some of it has to do with better nutrition. Some of it has to do with decreasing inflammation, particularly around the brain and the blood-brain barrier. There was a nice study in 2018 looking at the relationship between carnitine levels and major depressive disorder. And we saw people that had major depressive disorder had low carnitine levels. Well, carnitine is not something, it's conditionally necessary. That it means we can make some of it at a low background level, but if we don't eat it, it tends to be low. So if we look at vegetarians, vegans, and other plant-based people, they have lower carnitine levels. Incidentally, they have higher rates of mental health disorders. And so there may be some causation in that. But we saw that if you supplement these people that have major depressive disorder with carnitine, it improves their health. Now, meat is a wonderful, red meat in particular, is a wonderful source of carnitine. And so meat eaters tend to have higher carnitine levels. As far as the dementia crowd or the neurodegenerative crowd, whether it's multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease, so on and so forth, I've seen a number of anecdotal improvements. Absolutely. There is some research, at least in the ketogenic sphere. Dale Bredesen out of, I think, UCSF has done quite a bit of research with that, looking at ketogenic diets and Alzheimer's disease. And I think I saw there was a meta-analysis or a systematic review of about 60, it might have been 53 or 60 published cases on diet and mental health, and they're showing that there is definitely an effect that's occurring in that population. So I find that, having done a ketogenic diet, I find that a carnivore diet is like a ketogenic diet on steroids. I'll use that analogy. It just seems to be better. It just seems to be like, if we believe that a low carb diet, a diet that may produce ketones, is physiologically advantageous, then I would say, well, how did early humans do that? And they weren't eating Quest bars. They weren't, eating ketogenic cheesecakes with stevia. I mean, they were eating probably a bunch of fatty meat and, whatever else. Maybe they could scrounge up a few berries here and there in the summertime or fall, but that was probably their baseline default diet. And it's amazing. I'm certainly not the first guy. If you go back historically, to Scottish surgeons in the 1700s, there's Dr. Salisbury from the Salisbury steak in the 1800s. It was promoting this, Vilmar Stefansson in the 20s, Blake Donaldson in the 50s, even Atkins in the 70s was kind of, leaning on that. Probably, it was just probably, the winds were blowing so strong in your face to say that, wait a minute, meat is healthy and fruits and vegetables are maybe not all that necessary. And it's still, obviously, that's still the mindset. Most people think, oh, you got to have fruits and vegetables. And I'm like, well, I don't know if that's true. And like I said, we've gotten so many people now that have gone, they've gone from a diet that is a quote unquote healthy balanced diet where they're eating meat and they're eating fruits and vegetables and they're not eating junk food, and they drop the rest of it just to meat and they get better. And so it's like, well, what is your explanation for that? It's like, it's something that I think the question needs to be asked in a scientific way to find that out. And like I said, I'm trying to make that happen and should be successful at that.
I started off, and I was, when I was on the Highland Games circuit, I was well over 300 pounds and had a horrendous diet because I would just eat everything I could get my hands on. Was having real blood sugar problems. And that's what led me to a ketogenic diet. 2012, I didn't know what a ketogenic diet was. I just realized, the more sugar I put in my body, the more processed grains I put in my body, the worse I feel. So I cut that out and immediately started to improve. Blood sugar issues started to go away. Then a few years later, I heard keto for the first time and immediately started adding fat to everything, and I'm cooking in fat and I'm eating avocado and I'm adding sour cream to this and that and everything. And then 2018, I came across, I don't remember when you were on Rogan, but I came across your podcast and said, well, I'm going to give this a try. And the prevailing theory was, well, if you're not taking in glucose, if you're not 75-25 or 80-20 ratio of fat to protein, you're going to start turning this into sugar in your body. I don't know how that works. It's never been an issue with me. And to be quite honest, when I'll stray away from carnivore and I'll have some avocados or, I'll mix blueberries in, or I'll try to eat a salad more. The further I go back and get closer to pure carnivore, the better I feel, the better I look, the better I perform. And when you streamline it, when you strip it all down to the basics and eat red meat for your meals, and that's it. And for me, I don't I don't limit the amount of red meat I eat. I eat as much as I feel like eating at that point. I look better. I feel better. I perform better. It's only when I get off it that bad things start to happen.
Yeah, and this is, maybe this is this World Carnivore Month that I kind of started 4 years ago in January.
Yes.
January, that's my birth. I turned 54 in 2 days, and so I kind of was annoyed that there was a Veganuary during the year I turned, during my birthday. So I said, hell with it, we're going to make it World Carnivore Month. So I started that, and so I've been now for a little over 4 years eating a carnivorous diet, and for long periods of time, nothing but red meat every meal, two, 3 meals a day. And then I would, I'd add some eggs, add a little bit of dairy, have some spices. And, that's kind of my maintenance. And I feel pretty decent, but usually during this World Carnivore Month, I just kind of dial it all back to pure straight up red meat, water, and salt. That's what I've been doing. It's day 8 now. We're January 8th. And again, I just feel great. I mean, this is like, I always feel better when I do that. So I get that, it's like, even these small foods that are still decent foods are not quite as good as red meat. And that's, and I think about it, when I look at, people are like, well, what about chicken? Why don't you want to eat chicken? Well, I think about, let's say, you and I were out in a field 50,000 years ago and we got a spear and there's a bird and there's a big old giant slow moving red meat animal. I'm not going to spend my time chasing birds around with a spear because that's, one, you're not going to get much food, and two, it's probably not going to be very successful. So you go where the easy money. And I think that's where we come from. That's what our baseline, that's, the optimal foraging strategy or hunting strategy would be: go after the big animals. You only got to make one kill every 2-3 months, maybe. And you got, 7,000 pounds worth of food, and you're living in a tribe of 15, 20 people. That's probably what they did. I mean, they probably said, okay, hey, Urk, we're getting a little low on elephant ribs. Go kill another elephant. Okay, no problem. I think that's probably how we did that. And this is how the foods that we eat are what we do.
Yeah. When I did the first carnivore month in January and started this journey, I was at 260 pounds. By the end of January, I think I was down to 240. And then I said, well, I'm going on vacation in April. I'll just keep this going. By the time I was down to 215, and I'm eating like a horse. I mean, it was just, I was eating as much meat as because I'm a big eater. I've always been a big eater, and I'm losing weight like crazy. I'm not doing anything different. I'm still slinging kettlebells and doing my thing, but I don't know how it works. But for me, it was a big weight loss, and it was all bad weight.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that debate on how it works and why it works, and it's probably a combination of many things. There's people out say, "What's all calorie deficit?" And there's certainly a satiety factor. When you talk about you eat as much as you want. I mean, I've had 5 steaks today. I mean, and they're all about 1 pound. So I've had about 5 pounds of meat today, and I'm sitting at about 250 right now. I'm 6'5", so I mean, and that's a pretty good weight for me. I like sitting around right there, and I'm pretty lean, and I still train pretty hard, but for a lot of people, it's so profoundly satiating that they just thought they're not going to eat that much. They're going to tend not to overeat. We know that protein, and again, a red meat diet is going to be high in protein. It may not be, super high in protein, but it's going to be more likely to be higher in protein than the average person's diet. If we look at the average person in the United States, their protein intake is around 12 to 16% of their total food. So that's, in my view, too low. I think we're probably closer to, I think evolutionarily, we're probably closer around 30%. And so what does a 30% protein diet look like in a meat-based diet? Well, it looks like a ribeye steak. I mean, that's about what that is. It's about 70% fat, 30% protein by calories. But so when you eat more protein, we know there's an increased thermogenic effect of food on protein. 25% of the protein you eat is utilized to digest it. The calories they just kind of go away to digest it. Whereas fat and carbs, somewhere around 5% of that is used to, metabolically digest or utilize that food. So you get those benefits. There's a huge debate on, do dropping carbs, does it provide an advantage towards, metabolism? Guys like David Ludwig will say yes. Other researchers, Kevin Hall, will say no. And it's back and forth. I don't really care at the end of the day. I don't care what the mechanism is. There's some people like Ron and Patrick will say, well, you got to know the mechanism. I'm like, Not really. I think you just got to know the results. You got to know what you do and what the result is at the end of the day. Because the mechanism, it's one mechanism of probably thousands. I mean, when we look at how complicated the human body is, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And it's just like, it's almost like a black box. Yeah, we know some of the things, but at the end of the day, what I focus on is the end of the day, what are the results people are getting? What did you do? What were the results? And then if you can describe the mechanism by which it does, and this is what, this is a drug company manufacturing mentality. It's like, oh my gosh, there's some people getting better. What was a chemical reaction that occurred? How do we patent it and turn it into a drug? And it always kind of backfires because you're like, well, wait a minute, it probably affected. This is interesting. I didn't know this, and I found this out recently. I interviewed a guy named Stefan Van Vliet out of Duke University. He's a metabolic researcher. There's a field called nutriomics where they're looking at the compounds that are found in food, and meat has something like 55,000 unique compounds. It's not just B vitamins and iron and protein and fat. 55,000 unique compounds that are specific to meat and red meat. And then when they look at these plant-based, analogs, these fake meats, there's only about a 10% concordance rate. So you're only getting about 10% of the same nutrients from a plant-based fake burger as you are from a real meat burger. Even if the protein is the same amount, even if the fat's the same amount, even if the calories are the same amount, even if it tastes and looks like it, you're only getting about 10% of the actual nutrition. And what we're discovering is, all these compounds, whether it's creatine, carnosine, taurine, choline, all these compounds that we're just now kind of learning what they do are not really present in these plant-based foods. And so these people are saying, oh, it's just, if we can just make it taste the same and look the same, people are going to give up the meat. There'll be some people that might do that, but it's not going to do you any nutritional favors.
Well, I don't know how well they're doing with making it. I refuse to taste it, but I don't know if you've ever tasted one before, but you see it in the grocery store, and it does not look like something I'd want to put in my mouth. I mean, the ground meat, whatever it is just, it's gray. It's horrid looking.
Well, when you realize it's just a processed food, so I'd no rather eat a bag of I'd probably rather eat a pizza or a bowl of ice cream than I would that. But I mean, it's in the same class, and so I think they should take it out of the meat section and put it in the potato chip aisle. As far as I'm concerned, it may have happened that happened in the grocery store when I was there one time. I can't confirm that, but I might have accidentally had it in my cart and couldn't remember where it went, and it might have went in the potato chip pile or something like that. So
that should be the new movement out there to restock the shelves.
Yeah, restock the shelves appropriately to where that stuff needs to be. Yeah, because I think that's appropriate for that. But and the other thing, and this is a thing, I think a lot of people are switched on to the fact that yes, it's highly processed garbage, seed oils, refined grains, it's soybean oil and pea protein powder, and that's what they use, and then a bunch of fake flavorings. But a lot of people are willing to accept this cell culture technology, and so we're going to take a cell from a cow and grow it in a petri dish, and it's going to be meat. Well, if you dig down into that, and a lot of people are just taking the Memphis meat or these companies, they're marketing for truth. What's really happening is, and this is a technology that exists today. So how does a cow grow? Well, like a calf is going to be, its muscle cells are going to be exposed to its blood, and the blood is going to bring nutrients, and it depends on what it eats and so on and so forth. So how do you bypass that? Well, what they do right now is they'll harvest a cell from a cow. And then they'll put it in this, in this dish, and they have to bathe it in something called fetal bovine serum. So what does that mean? It's what it sounds like. It's basically blood from a cow fetus. Well, where do you get blood from a cow fetus? Well, you got to take a pregnant cow that gets killed, and then you have to take the fetus that's still alive, that hasn't quite died yet, and you have to extract blood from that cow. And they usually do it through something called a thoracentesis, where they stick a big needle through the cow's chest into the heart, suck out the blood, and the cow cannot have any anesthesia. The fetus can't have any anesthesia because it would compromise the integrity of the serum. So they have to do that. And then they have to keep doing that over and over and over again to continue to provide this fluid that these cells can bathe in. So that's giving it the growth factors now. So that's, a lot of people would sort of say that's not very cool as far as ethics go. So vegans are not going to be particularly excited about that. But now we talk about, well, how do you feed these cells? They don't just grow without food. It's not like they're just going to start growing and there's no input. So you have to give them amino acids and protein and glucose. Well, where do you get that from? Well, you got to grow a bunch of soybeans. You got to grow a big, or peas or whatever wherever you're going to get these amino acids from. So you have to grow that. And that becomes very destructive environmentally. You have these big, monocropped, it's GMO imported from China, whatever. And then you feed these cells and then they produce all this waste you have to dispose of. And then there's the issue of the fact that these cells don't have an immune system. So what happens when it's exposed to a contaminant, bacteria, viruses, funguses, or fungi? So we have to now bathe those things in virucides and fungicides and antibiotics to keep them protected. And so then these cells are going to continue to grow. And so they have these immortal cell lines. And so it's interesting, like if you go, they have these cells that have been growing since the 1960s, like these breast cancer cells that have been growing and growing and growing and reproducing and making transcription errors and mutating and growing and growing. So you just have this big glob of never-ending growing cells that eventually will become possibly cancerous. That's what they're going to feed you. And they're going to tell you that, hey, it's just the same as meat. And we don't even know those 50,000 compounds that I talked about. They may get a handful of them right, but they're not going to get them all right. And then the other thing is, it's fossil fuel dependent. A cow requires rainwater and sunlight, basically. It's solar powered. It's self-replicating. You basically, if you can raise a cow to where it just chews on grass and grows, and you can certainly do that. Now we try to make that more efficient by feeding them grain for the last 2 or 3 months or 4 months of their life. But comparing that to these giant bioreactors with all the fossil fuel inputs, the waste products, the way it's done is just not something they're going to let you know about. They're going to show you this glob on the plate and say, hey, it's better for the environment, better for you. And it's total BS.
Well, I think that's what we deal with so many things nowadays is the truth. The truth is a very valuable commodity, and people aren't willing to look into what they're eating, who they're voting for, what exercise routine they should be doing. It's just, they take somebody's word for it, like you said, Beyonce, and they just roll with it.
Well, I mean, and again, the truth, that is a very unfortunate. It seems like there would be a definition of the truth, or there would be a truth, but I think it's whoever has the loudest megaphone, whoever yells the loudest, whoever gets the most attention. And we see that in the, how we see that with social media and the media's, there's a message that they want people to hear, and that is going to be the truth. And many people take it as gospel, and they're like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't even make sense. There's no common sense to that. Well, it doesn't matter. Just shut up and don't ask questions type of thing. And so the truth is basically whoever pays for it. And I think that's what we're seeing now is, all these environmental claims about, cow burps. And, most people say cow farts. It's actually, they're burping, creating methane is the number one most destructive force on the planet as far as climate change goes. And there's no evidence that supports that outside of vegan propaganda or propaganda coming out from Patrick Brown and Ethan Brown from Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger and some of the fossil fuel companies that are like, hey, we'll blame the cows, just point the finger somewhere else. Yes, all the cows for it. And, it doesn't matter that we're, that we've got things that are more likely to produce greenhouse gases. And again, that's another topic. If you believe that's even making a difference, some people don't, it's just
right. Yeah.
It's a rabbit hole for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, when there were certainly more bison in this part of the world. I mean, there was a time when the whole North America was covered in bison. There was a time when the whole planet was covered in giant dinosaurs. Well, I'm sure did the same type of burping and,
Well, I mean, some people argue, well, humans didn't live in the time of dinosaurs, so it's apples to oranges. But I mean, certainly when we look at the North American bison population, anywhere between 30 and upward, some estimates put it as high as 100 million. And so the U.S. cattle population is right at about 90 million. We turn over about 30 million cows a year here, but it's not just bison. I mean, the deer population, the elk population was humongous back then. And you're right, there were, if we go back to just to the end of the last ice age, we had just as many, if not more, animals burping and farting and crapping than we did now. I mean, and they were bigger animals too. And then if we go back even farther, in the time of human beings, 100,000 years ago, 200,000 years ago, we had even more of that. So to blame that natural methane cycle as causative is not supported by anything. There's lots of studies that have been done on NASA's JPL Jet Propulsion Laboratory has done a lot of isotopic data on the atmosphere and looking, where is this methane coming from? It's not coming from the cows. It's coming from other sources, wetlands leaking, and some of the hydroelectric power plants, rice paddies, but it's not coming from cows. That's not happening. Right. This natural methane cycle has been occurring for tens of millions of years, without problem.
Yeah, and just like we talked about earlier, there's such a political bent to this, and just the fact, just looking at your comment section on Instagram and seeing these oddballs come in with the same. Is your favorite question of all times, how do you get your vitamin C, and aren't you afraid you're going to get scurvy? Because I've seen you answer that 100
well,
times.
I mean, in the beginning, it was interesting to me because it was like I didn't know. I was like, shit, I thought like everybody else did. Hey, I'm going to get scurvy, and it didn't happen. And I was like, well, that's interesting. That's at least interesting. And then I started looking into some of the science behind that, and the fact that I'm not concerned about that. And there's people that. Then the people come out, well, maybe you're not going to get scurvy, but you're going to have some subclinical vitamin deficiency. It's going to cause you to die early in 30 years. I'm like, that's bullshit. That's just a stupid comment, because not only do we not know that, there's no way you could ever prove that. And, ultimately I'm going to die of something regardless. Right. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people, scurvy was one, the lack of fiber, the artery clogging and all that stuff. And again, none of that is happening to this population. I've had the opportunity to now see tens of thousands of people pursue this, and I've collected data on them, and I'm pretty confident that at the very least we're doing better than the standard American diet, which I think that says something alone by that. And at the very best, it may be an optimal diet for many people. And I do think that animal-based nutrition is superior. I think it is what humans were evolved to do. It's what we've done for, it's the people that say, well, I think the plant-based arguments are laughable, but people will say, well, the only reason people ate meat is because they were starving and there was no other food. Well, I said, well, guess what? 10,000 years ago, we developed agriculture. Guess what we kept doing? We kept eating meat. Yeah. There was a reason for that, because people understand, and every indigenous tribe that's ever lived on the planet realizes that even if they live in a tropical environment with fruit everywhere, they still dedicate many hours a day to hunting. That says a lot.
That's what drives it home for me, is just looking at history and looking how we would have eaten and how we eat now, and it just makes more sense to me. I wanted to ask you about type 1 diabetics. I've got a friend who's a type 1 diabetic who has gone to a carnivore diet and is blowing his doctor's vines. They don't understand how he's thriving. They don't understand why he's using insulin. He's got the monitor on his hip that gives him constant blood sugar readings, and he says it looks like a straight line.
Yeah. So if we go back to before insulin was, exogenous insulin was invented, when Banting discovered this back in 1924 or 25 or something like that, there were some researchers. One guy that I did in particular, named Louis Newberg at the University of Michigan, was looking at basically carnivorous diets. Cantini was an Italian researcher back in the late 1800s doing the same thing. Because back then, when people had diabetes, it was primarily type 1 diabetes, because we didn't have all the fat people developing insulin resistance into type 2 diabetes. So most people that had diabetes back in those days were thin. What they would do is they would starve to death, because what would happen is they couldn't utilize insulin. As much as insulin is malign, insulin is extremely important. You can't build muscle. You can't hang on to tissue without insulin. So you need an amount of insulin. And when type 1 diabetic stops making insulin, they can eat 20,000 calories a day, and they're not going to put on weight. They're not going to gain. They're just going to starve to death, and they're just going to utilize their own tissue. They're going to break it down. They become cachectic. They waste away. They basically starve to death. Even though there's food, they're starving to death. So what he discovered that was when he put people on these higher fat diets that were devoid of carbohydrates, they normalized their blood glucose. And this is back in the 1920s. They didn't have ways to really refine measure it like we do now. So they looked, a lot of times they were looking at urine, because what happens is after a certain blood glucose threshold, some people say 140, 160, 180, you start spilling, glucose in your urine. So he would take these people that were septic, horrible infections, ready to die, put them on this high fat approach diet, this kind of meat-based diet, and would basically cure them of this. And then not only that, they would live for many years afterwards, as long as they stuck to the diet. And that's kind of some of the historical context. But what I've seen, and I see a lot of type 1 diabetics now that have done this carnivore diet, and generally with very good consistency, their insulin requirements drop dramatically. Their blood glucose basically becomes normal. They have very little fluctuation in their blood glucose. It's just like you said, it's a flat line. Their hemoglobin A1C may be 4.6, 4.8, 5.0. Contrast that to the typical type 1 diabetic, where they're very happy if their hemoglobin A1C is below 7. Their average blood glucose tends to be about I'm using English or US terms here, 170, 180, whereas these other people are seeing averages in the 70s and 80s. It is, in my view, probably the most appropriate diet for a type 1 diabetic. Interestingly, one of the things they see is, when we first started giving insulin, well, not when we first, but when we started to develop insulin, human insulin, which has now been replaced with synthetic insulin or analog insulin, the profile for human insulin is very slow onset, takes about an hour to reach its peak, lasts 4 or 5 hours. It mimics kind of what a meat meal would do as far as blood glucose is concerned. So what they've developed these ultra rapid acting insulins that are designed to cover carbs, which were not really. So we need this fake insulin to cover carbs, right. But when we use real insulin, it covers protein and fat, which is meat. So I think that is kind of our optimal situation with type 1s. And so there's a guy named Richard Bernstein, who he's an 85-year-old guy who wrote a book called The Diabetes Solution. And he's been a type 1 diabetic for 65 years. He's been doing this forever. And he is low carb, just about meat-based, just about carnivore diet. And, a few little exceptions there. And he takes care of people. And his belief that diabetics, and particularly diabetic kids, in fact, there's a study out of Harvard called the Type 1 Grit Study that is also doing our carnivore study. So we have a Harvard study coming out. But their belief is there's no reason a type 1 diabetic should not have normal blood glucose, which is shocking. Most endocrinologists are happy if it even comes anywhere near close to slightly above normal or well above normal. But absolutely, this should be something that should be normalized, as far as type 1 diabetics are concerned. But the endocrinologists, one of the problems with endocrinologists is they intentionally tell people to run their blood glucose a little high so they avoid this hypoglycemic issue, because some people, it's extremely rare. Some people will get very low blood glucose and they'll develop a seizure. Some people have died from this. Extremely unlikely. But what typically happens is we see that in the people that are eating a bunch of carbs, because what happens is they eat carbs and they have to give themselves a massive amount of insulin, and then they overcorrect and then they end up with this super low blood glucose. But when you go on and this is what Newberg back in the 1920s saw, he saw almost no hypoglycemia. Fat-based diets sort of just kind of smooth everything out so that the blood glucose doesn't change. It doesn't go too high, it doesn't go very low. So you have this very narrow band of relatively nice glucose control. So yeah, absolutely. This is a tremendously effective diet for type 1 diabetics.
Well, good. I've got 2 more. I'm pushing towards it, and hopefully they'll listen to this and jump on board. But speaking of helping people, I don't want to take too much of your time, but tell them about MeatRx and what you offer for them so they can look into that and get some help.
Yeah, so MeatRx is a company that I founded with my partner, who is another person whose autoimmune issues and health got tremendously better using a carnivore diet. And she's a data engineer, machine learning specialist, AI engineer out of Silicon Valley. And so we formed this company which we started last year. And it started out as a, kind of a platform to get help, coaching, support meetings, resources. We've got, just kind of, recipes, all kinds of literature, information for people to utilize. And so we've incorporated, where to get ethically raised meat. We provide discounts for meat and, hook you up with ranchers and products and all that stuff. And then we're evolving into this. We're trying to put some of this machine learning into this to start to tailor these things a little more for people that with different conditions and how to maybe reintroduce certain foods. So that's coming in the near future. And we're about to scale up quite a bit here in the very near future. But what we do is, we have, instantaneous coaching if somebody needs that. We have, scheduled coaching. I still do a little bit, just a little bit during the week, but I'm kind of dialing back from that just as I don't have time anymore. But it's really for anybody that's wanting to go on a meat-based diet or explore it. It's probably it's the most comprehensive, full service place you can go to get as much information as it's out there. We have all the information you could possibly want on it. We have all the resources, all the help, and we're continuing to expand upon that because this is something that I think we need more data from. And so one of my desires is to start to collect more data from people so that we can start to sort of figure out patterns and figure out how to best accommodate people. And it's also one of those things, that going on a meat-based diet can be isolating socially. And, your family may say you're nuts, you're crazy. Your doctor may say you're nuts, you're crazy, or try to dissuade you. And we have people that have been there, done that can be supportive. We have physicians that are part of the program we can refer you to that will be supportive. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we're doing right now.
Yeah, your doctor is going to tell you you're crazy right off the bat, and you have to stick to your guns and do what makes sense.
Yeah, like I said, many doctors will, not all. There are some that are coming around. And certainly, at the very least, many of them are being acceptive of a lower carbohydrate diet and a ketogenic diet. And then when you get to the carnivore-based diet, their concern is, some kind of nutrient deficiency and the lack of vegetables scares them, I think unnecessarily. But, it remains to be seen. We are kind of pushing the edges, the envelope here and seeing what happens, which, it can end very, very, it can advance the science or it can end badly. We'll see.
Sure.
I mean, I think we're all adults and, trying to make our own decisions. And I think that's important to be able to do that.
What a novel idea. Make your own decisions and do what's right for yourself. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for doing this in general. Carnivore has been a huge help for me. It's changed my life. I perform better. I look better. I think my attitude and mood around people has changed significantly. It truly is. It is meat is medicine. And I think more people should look into it and don't believe the skinny guy with the dad bod telling you that you got to eat sprouts and lettuce all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's, obviously I'm biased towards people that cultivate strength. And I think that's a good quality to have. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're unintelligent or, a bad person, but for wanting to optimize your body and perform well. And I do think that this is one of the more topics that is less appreciated is a mental health side of it, and it does suit it. It kind of chills you out, it kind of,
yes,
you can still perform and you can do what you need to do when the time comes. But I mean, I think you do send a sort of, it changes your perspective on a lot of things, and it does give you a bit of an attitude adjustment in a good way, I think.
I agree 100%. My attitude, and guys will tell you that I competed with is completely changed. And look, I didn't go to some yoga retreat in India. I've changed my diet considerably, and it changed my outlook on life. It changed my mood and my temperament, and it's been all good. So thank you.
Well, Mark, appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity, and hopefully your audience will learn something. And anyway, appreciate the opportunity.
And thanks for coming on the show, Doc. I appreciate it.